Hey, I don't know if I'm live. I never know, but now I'm not even looking at the right screen. I'm trying to get my shit together. But technically, I'm 2 minutes earlier and now it's doing something. What's it doing? Do we even know? Is it going to make me run for another room? Maybe. Um, just kind of hoping. All right, it says we're live. So, hey, I'm 2 minutes earlier than I said I would be, but I'm technically 2 hours late. So, you win some, you lose some, all the things. So let's just get into it. And well, let me pull up, make sure that you guys can see me. I can be seen. Can I be heard? I can be heard too. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for understanding and being patient while I come to you live today. My day did not go the way that I thought it would. Just stuff I didn't anticipate getting done today got done today, which is great, but that means that I was late for you. So I do apologize. But let's get into it today. We have 20 minutes. Let's talk about 6 signs of communication from your horse. Some of these are very subtle. Okay, some of these are very subtle, and interpretation is a thing, right? We all have our own kind of interpretation for these things, and we get to start to listen to ourselves more, right? Like this is that whole intuition talk, is understanding what we perceive from a communication signal. And that's going to vary by person. And I know that there's a big difference in how I interpret some of these things now versus how I interpreted them when I was much younger. And I think a lot of them, there are a lot of these little subtle signals that I did not even acknowledge until the last, I don't know, 5 years of my life with horses. Really, though, I've started to pick up on more of it through my work as a massage therapist because I look for different things. When I'm working with a horse from a therapy perspective, I'm looking for very subtle cues that they're relaxed, very subtle cues that this isn't their jam, very subtle cues that they would really like to tell me to fuck off right now, but they're minding their P's and Q's, right? Those are important things for me as a therapist to be able to pick up on and to understand and to perceive from them. There is a point where this would have been very useful as a rider, as a trainer, as a horse person in general. And I just didn't know, right? I just didn't know what I was missing because I wasn't even open to that world. So, we'll get to that in a minute, I guess. So let's just start with the six steps, okay? Those six steps, 6 things that we're going to be looking for is what our first impressions are, right? Are they interested in engaging with us, or are they like, peace out, I'm running to the back part of the pasture, or even just fucking ignoring your existence when you show up to the pasture, right? Are their ears on you, or are they completely ignoring you? Are their eyes shiny and engaged, or dull and like they're out in outer space, right? So those are first impressions that we're going to take in. Now this is, the next couple are things that we're not going to be able to like dig into deep just because time constraints, right? And again, this is stuff that I teach a little bit more, a little bit, definitely a lot more actually, and a lot more in depth in the Intuitive Equine Bodywork Certification Program for sure, because we're going to talk about posture. Okay, right? So when we're assessing posture, now you can learn about that in this group. You can go up to the featured section of this group, and there's a post that talks about horse triage, right? Where you can post pictures of your horse and I'll give you feedback on that. There's also a link there in that post for you to get a photo markup guide. So if you have not yet gotten your photo markup guide, you can get that there, which is going to teach you the very basics of taking pictures, how to take the pictures, what pictures to take, and then how to analyze them. And then it kind of links you back into the group here where you can learn a little bit more about exactly how to assess the posture, how we actually mark up the photos and all of that. That's also in this group, but it kind of all comes full circle through the photo markup guide. So go up to the top to the featured section and find in there the horse triage post. You can choose to just post the pictures that I ask for and let me mark them up, or you can grab that photo markup guide and learn a little bit more yourself. Okay, so that's the bit of posture that is taught in this group. We definitely take that a step further in the certification program. But when we're looking at posture, the other thing that we can really kind of zone in on is what's their breathing like? Is it shallow or deep, fast or slow, right? And we look at that through their nostrils and their belly. And the other thing we can assess with both nostrils and belly with their breathing is their belly tucked up tight, or is it down low and kind of bloated out? Pregnancy doesn't count. We cut those mirrors some slack. And are their nostrils nice and relaxed, or are they tight, wrinkly? Are they even, uneven? Things like that, right? All of these things that I mentioned so far are things that I don't necessarily think that other people consider communication, but we have to remember that communication is all of it, and that we can perceive all of these signs as bits of communication. We're always sending a message, even when we don't think we are. Even as humans, you are doing that with your body, with your posture, with your nostrils, with your belly, with your breathing style, with the, oh my gosh, resting bitch face. Am I right? But it's the same. It's the same concept, where we're just going to pick up on these little things. Now, gait analysis is something that we do not cover in this group at all. It's too much. It's too deep. I have taught it in other places, but it absolutely isn't part of the certification program. And that is just another form of communication, right? When we can look at their gait and how they're moving, they aren't trying to tell you a story, but they are telling the story. So we get to consider that as a part of communication. An easy one that I think a lot of us pick up on, and sometimes we're not even aware that we're picking up on, is their body language, right? The average horse person, the horse person that's been around for, any length of time, really starts to pick up on which way are their eyes going, or ears, which way are their ears going. So, Mr. Potato Head, and I'm sure y'all have seen Toy Story, and Mr. Potato Head's like digging through his butt pocket, and he's like, I gotta find my angry eyes. Okay, your horses have angry eyes. They also have angry ears. My daughter used to call everything became angry eyes, angry ears, angry eyes with people. Like, she'd be like, I have my angry eyes on, when she was a toddler, right? And then when she was that young also, she learned that the horses had angry ears when they were pinned back, or they had happy ears when they were forward, or they had sleepy ears when they were nice and floppy. Right? So as horse people, we have that basic understanding of body language when it comes to eyes and ears. And I think to some extent, we also pick up on angry feet and scared feet. Like, how are they moving their feet? Are they prepared? Are they tense like a coil, right? We see all of those things, and we don't necessarily consider it gait analysis. We don't necessarily consider, I'm reading it. I'm trying to keep myself on track. We don't necessarily consider it body language as in open communication all the time. We don't always read into the signals that they're giving us, but we should. We should, because some of the things that we definitely don't read into are things like blocking. I see this so often with my clients. They're telling me that they don't think their horse has a problem, blah, blah, blah. Their saddle is fine. They know their saddle is fine. But then I watch them go to put the saddle on the horse, and the horse just keeps getting in front of them, keeps bringing their head around and literally blocking the path. And they just plow right through that block, right? We just ignore that. And that to me is a sign right away that the horse is not happy with the saddle. There's a problem. They're tolerating what you're doing, but they're trying to tell you no, right? And this can happen with a lot of things. Blocking can be done way before we get to the saddle. Blocking can be a thing where they're like, no, I don't want you on this side, right? If we go back, and you don't have to, you shouldn't have to. These are signs that your horse can be telling you at any stage in training. But when we go back to the early days of training, where a horse hasn't even gotten saddled yet, but they're getting used to having someone on both sides and brushing them on both sides and just working from both sides and doing scary things on both sides, a horse will block you on one side and say, no, not back here. This side, I'm not comfortable having you over here. That is a sign, not just that they don't necessarily want you there, but maybe there's pain on that side. Maybe because, right, they're protective of that side because of a way that they're maybe moving, feeling, they had an injury, or they have a weakness on that side. And as a prey animal, they're trying to communicate without being totally lame, like obviously bait for the lion. So we get to be aware of that. And the other thing is tail swishing, which can be very tricky to interpret when it's fly season and there's flies everywhere. But when you can start to associate a certain action with a certain tail swish, A perfect example of this would be yesterday. I was out working with my 5-year-old Frisian quarter horse cross who has rehabbed over the last year, and he's much better, but we're still working on things, right? And so yesterday I was doing some osteopathic balancing in his foreleg, which requires testing range of motion. And every time I tested a specific range of motion on one particular joint, we got 3 or 4 tail swishes at once. That told me there's something going on here. Could it have been flies? Well, sure, because he's swishing his tail, except where I did it enough times to put 2 and 2 together and be like, nope, these 2 actions are associated. So it takes a little bit more awareness and being willing to consider that they are trying to tell us a story, right? So the next thing that we're going to look at here as a sign of communication is their emotional state. Sometimes this is super easy and super obvious to pick up on. When a horse can't stand still and their head's in the air and their ears are all over the place and they're screaming, anxiety, right? We're anxious about something. Maybe it's buddy sour or whatever, but it's still an anxiety, right? Other times, maybe their head's just really low and they're not really eating and they seem lethargic and they just don't care about anything. We can recognize that as depression. Horses get depressed when they lose their friends. Horses get depressed when they lose their owner or their owner stops spending as much time and attention with them as they did previously, right? So what's their emotional state? Are they excited? Are they anxious? Are they depressed? Are they mopey? Are they just regular old them, like regular content day? This gets a little bit more nuanced. And again, this is something that we kind of talk about a little bit more in the intuitive equine bodywork certification program because it's an intuition thing, right? Which brings us to energy and vibe. And again, we build this in the program because it's part of developing your intuition and picking up on that energy. What's the vibe you're getting from them? Again, we can come back to an emotional state, but this could be a little bit more subtle. And they can be blocking you emotionally, right? There can be a block, emotional blocking and an avoiding of certain things. And it can all tie back to pain, but it can also just tie back to emotional things, avoiding situations. Trying to think of one because I know that I have these conversations a lot where it's like your horse is having, so your horse can be offended and then try and avoid certain activities because they're like, I'm not doing this with you right now because you're not listening to this, right? Like you're not listening to my opinion on this, so I'm not going to cooperate and do this with you right now. And we can absolutely start an argument about that and push them through and teach them a lesson and all that, or we can understand where they're coming from and we can create a higher and better solution that doesn't cause resistance, right? So the big thing here is understanding what they're trying to communicate. I see this all the time where people just don't even know that their horses are in pain and they just think they have a naughty horse, right? I know you guys have heard Leanne's story. Especially if you listened to the podcast last week, right? We talked a lot about how that was what people were telling her about her horse. He was just being an asshole. He was just being a jerk and he just needed to be taught a lesson. But on other levels, I've seen that as well with people who come to me and they say, I don't know what the problem is. They just seem really distant and they won't communicate with me right now. Everything they're doing is a communication. Every time you offer an engagement. So for example, you go out to the pasture and you have the halter and you're going to request that they come with you, right? That you're going to go, whatever it is you do. So for me and Bruce, it's like I take the halter out there and I'm offering it to him. I'm offering an opportunity to interact. And the moment he pulls his head away and is like, I would rather leave, that's communication. And then we can get offended about it or we can just try and understand it. Right? And it is totally fair for them to have a day where they're like, not today. I'm just not feeling it because we've all had those days, right? So not everything is something that, this is a major problem. We need to look into it, but sometimes it is. So the best example that I have is, or at least the one that's coming to mind is probably 2 weeks ago, I was at a farm seeing multiple horses. And the last horse I saw that day, the girl, she's a great kid. This horse was feral a year ago, and this year they have been to multiple shows, and horse loves girl, girl loves horse. It's dream come true. It's a teenage girl. It's amazing. But she expressed to me that she's been having trouble getting and keeping canter leads. And I'm like, well, this is kind of a complicated situation because your horse is not used to carrying you. She's a young horse and she's just come into work. So there's probably some weakness going on, right? So we address a lot of that. And I do feel like there's a lot going on in that horse's body. But, we get to take it one step at a time. And she wasn't very communicative with me. So as I was doing body work, she was kind of zoning out or ignoring me. I could tell when things were uncomfortable for her because she would go into her own stress coping mechanism. So she would kind of lip on things, start biting a little bit of like the wood in front of her. So she was kind of communicating on that level. However, she wasn't engaging with me, right? Not every communication is an engagement. So I just kept going through the session, and I always have a conversation with clients afterwards when I can have a better, clear understanding of like what I think. Like I can take in all the information and make a good hypothesis about what's going on and what we need to do next steps. But this girl asked, can you check our saddle? I just want to make sure it's right, which God love her. Like, you are doing the best thing by your horse. You just want to check it. Absolutely. Let's check your saddle. And I watched her blow right through every signal her horse gave her that she does not want the saddle anywhere near her. And they weren't obvious, right? It was the blocking of the head. It was a change in her facial expression and her kind of scooting her body as far away as she could as the saddle approached, right? And so we talked about it. We talked about how those are all signs and signals. And I wasn't really surprised to see that. The saddle was a decent fit. However, her rider was placing it too far forward. Placement is so crucial. I see that as an error all the time. You might have a saddle that's a good fit, but if you're not putting it in the right place, problem. So we talked about putting the saddle in the right place and also getting her horse more massages because she's obviously uncomfortable. But it's those little signals that your horse is telling you. And then we wonder why it gets to the point where they're bucking and rearing and throwing tantrums and not wanting to be caught. It's because at that point they're screaming at you. It starts with a whisper. And that whisper might be a change in facial expression or their head blocking your approach or refusing to put their nose in the halter, right? And it can be for a whole bunch of different reasons. It's not always pain. It has been emotional quarrel between horse and rider. That has been something that I've encountered as well. But we get to listen to those things. And when we don't listen to those things, we end up with them screaming at us, right? When we do listen, we end up with results where, yes, we still need to do body work and get the horse comfortable, but 2 weeks later, you now don't only have a very functional horse, but you have a horse that's way more engaged, a horse that actually wants to come to work. There was a horse that I worked with years ago, and he was also very stoic, and he had been known for just being a great horse and doing his job. He was kind of a trail horse that multiple people would ride, but consistently one person would work him during the weekdays when he didn't have trail rides to go on. And so she knew him, right? Or she thought she did. And eventually I get called out because he's no longer working like he used to. He's not maintaining canter leads. He's not wanting or seeming like he wants to do the work the same. And sure enough, he had a lot of soreness in his body. And the first 2 massages, he really didn't engage with me. Eventually I used my red light. And it changed everything. Like as soon as I started using that red light, he was like, what are you doing? And he started engaging. So after that 3rd massage, which mind you, I do 3 massages in about 2 weeks when I'm first starting with the horse. So it had been about 2 weeks. I got a message from his main rider and she was like, this horse is completely different. He engages with me every day. He's waiting at the gate to come in. It's like he actually wants to spend time with people, not just come in and do the bare minimum of his job. That is amazing. Especially if you're someone who wants to be at a competition level, to have a horse that is that connected to you and loves to work the way you love to do what you're doing, right? That you two get to do things that you love together all the time. It changes everything. It changes how you do the job. It changes how you feel about doing the job because it's not supposed to feel like a job. It's supposed to feel like fun. So there you go, guys. Those are your points of signs that your horse is giving you that are communication. And I know that this group in particular is full of people that strive for that level of communication and that you also desire to be able to be the person that helps your horse. Because I know that on some level, you all know that you're the person to do it. And that it is so rewarding. If you haven't experienced it before, I know that you've heard us talking about how rewarding it is, Leanne and I, about how rewarding it is to be the person that heals your horse, because it means something completely different. Your horse understands what it means when you're the person that's healing them. I mean, they're grateful that you pay someone else to do it, for sure. But when you're the one that shows up for them and fixes the problem, that again is another layer up to your relationship. So remember that the Intuitive Equine Bodywork Certification Program is here for you when you are ready to step into your highest self, your intuitive self, and become the horse, become the healer that your horse needs. You don't need to become a horse, I promise. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. Thanks for waiting for me. Thanks for being patient. I appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you later.